Today's case takes place in a small farming community called Earlville, Iowa. It's a story about love, betrayal, and murder. In Earlville, everyone knows everyone, and everyone knew Amy Mullis. She was a vibrant, social woman. But one day, she was suddenly dead. The entire community was shocked and wanted to know what had happened to Amy Mullis. On November 10, 2018, Todd Mullis, Amy's husband, called emergency services. He reported that his wife had been involved in some kind of accident. Todd was a straightforward, tough guy, a farmer who worked hard. On the phone, he sounded panicked and told the dispatcher, "I don't know if she was halfway out the door. I sent my son to check on her. He screamed at me and I ran over." Amy's son found his mother face down. A corn rake was protruding from her back. This is a very sharp, robust agricultural tool. It's nothing like an ordinary rake for leaves. The rake has 4 protruding tines that are typically very sharp. Since it would take too long for emergency services to arrive at the remote farm, and every minute counted, Todd picked up his wife's body, loaded her into his truck, and drove off. He called emergency services while they were on their way to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, Amy was sitting on her son Tristan's lap while Todd drove. The dispatcher asked Todd if he could feel anything like her pulse or breathing. Todd responded, "Amy? Amy? Can you hear me?" But Amy didn't respond. The dispatcher instructed Todd to pull over to the side of the road. Todd stopped, and the dispatcher asked if he felt capable of performing CPR. Todd said he would try anything. He tried to lay Amy flat on the seat and pumped her chest, hoping to revive her. "Come on, breathe," he pleaded. "Come on." But Amy never regained consciousness. The death in this small community shocked everyone. Such things just didn't happen in Earlville. Todd's version of events was that he didn't know what had happened. He assumed Amy had fallen onto the corn rake and it was an accident. But doubts about this account soon arose. One doesn't fall onto a 4-tined rake and suffer 6 puncture wounds. It was hard to believe this was an accident. Rumors began to circulate. Perhaps it wasn't an accident after all. It was said the couple had marital problems. In a case like this, one would think there shouldn't be many unanswered questions. Yet here we were, wondering what exactly had happened and why. Eventually, the state of Iowa charged Todd Mullis with first-degree murder. Amy was a young and beautiful woman. She was 39 years old, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and mother of 3 young children. In September 2019, almost a year after Amy's death, family and friends gathered in the Dubuque County courtroom as lead prosecutor Maureen Hughes described what she believed had happened to the woman they all knew so well. "Amy had so much life ahead of her," Hughes said, "but that life was brutally taken from her on November 10, 2018. Taken by the hands of this defendant, Amy's husband, Todd Mullis." Todd Mullis, the hard-working farmer whom many saw as a devoted father to Tristan, Taylor, and Wyatt, now stood trial for first-degree murder. This brutal, senseless murder happened in Earlville, Hughes continued. Amy was found by her 13-year-old son Tristan in this red shed on the family's hog farm. She was face down, with a corn rake protruding from her back. From the beginning of the trial, which was broadcast on court TV, Todd's attorney Gerald Feuerhelm agreed with prosecutors that Amy had been murdered. But he argued that Todd wasn't the one who killed her. "I believe you'll find there's reasonable doubt about Mr. Mullis's guilt," Feuerhelm said. "There's no way Todd could have killed Amy. He had no opportunity to do so." Legal experts Daniel and Dina Neshwat, hired by 48 Hours to examine the evidence from the defense perspective, and Matthew Triano, who examined it from the prosecution's view, agreed, "This isn't some random third party. This isn't a shot from distance. This is as close and personal, as serious and brutal and violent as it gets. Dr. Craig Thompson was on duty at the hospital in Manchester, Iowa, where Amy had once worked as a nurse, on the day of her death. Shortly after arrival at the hospital, I learned that Amy Mullis had been pronounced dead, he said. The first thing Thompson, the ER medical director, was told was that Amy's death was a tragic accident. Amy had been injured when she fell onto an overturned corn rake. Thompson is also a medical examiner and needed to ensure her injuries matched this story. Notable were 6 puncture wounds distributed across the back, he said. I found it very difficult to understand how 4 tines could cause 6 holes in a single impact. Literally, the math doesn't add up. Yes, it's simple math. We have a problem here. Dr. Kelly Cruz, a forensic pathologist from the state medical examiner's office, performed the autopsy on Amy Mullis. She found blunt force injuries to Amy's face, hands, and knees, possible evidence of a struggle. There were 2 different directions of the 6 puncture wounds, Dr. Cruz said. To me, this indicates she was impaled with the rake at least twice, possibly 3 times. This meant the Delaware County Sheriff's Office now had a murder to solve. Deputy Travis Hemisath went straight to the red shed. It was dark when I arrived at the farm, he said. There were a few drops of blood on the floor, and I was told that was where she had been lying. I looked at all the equipment there for additional evidence, like blood trails that would indicate an injury where she might have fallen elsewhere, other than where she was found. But I couldn't observe anything like that. Daniel and Dina Neshwat wondered if Amy's death was even a murder at all. If this was a murder, and someone stabbed Amy not once, not twice, but 3 times, you would see blood drops on the chemical containers, on the shed walls, on a suspect. You would see it on Amy. The Delaware County Sheriff's Office doesn't investigate many homicides. Amy's case was only their 4th in the past 10 years. So they asked the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation for help. The deputies began digging into the Mullis' marriage. They discovered that Amy had cheated on Todd 5 years earlier. Amy destroyed the foundation of their marriage, the trust in their marriage, by having an affair, an investigator said. Amy and Todd decided to work on their marriage. They went to counseling. Amy quit her hospital job to work on the farm. Todd said she wanted to spend more time with her family. But Amy told friends she had no choice. She left the hospital because it was a kind of deal she'd made with her husband. The terms of the deal were, Amy, you're done at the hospital. You're back on the farm. I'm keeping an eye on you. And Todd's position was, she chose this, right? We agreed. This is how it would be. It took Todd a very long time to really trust Amy again. In fact, she told her friend Terry Stainer she felt like a prisoner. It was very regulated who she could do things with, Stainer said. There was kind of a joke about the approved friends list that Amy could actually do things with. She was timed when she left the house and when she came back. There was a saying that she was Todd's prisoner. In 2018, Amy confided in friends like Patricia Christopherson that things weren't going well. She wasn't happy in her marriage and hadn't been for many years, Christopherson said. But Todd told John Turbot, a special investigator helping with the investigation, a completely different story. When Turbot asked him how he would describe his marriage, Todd replied, "Pretty good, actually. Yeah, communication was great. We were together all the time. It was good. Yeah, things were good between us." It simply wasn't the whole truth. In July 2018, 5 years after Amy's affair, Todd had noticed a change in her. His antennas were up. Wait a minute, I've seen this movie before, he thought. And that set off alarm bells for him. While reviewing phone records, Todd discovered his wife had been communicating with another man. Jerry Frazier, a field manager for the Mullis farm. Todd couldn't see their 128 text messages, but Matt Triano says when Todd confronted Frazier, he was told nothing was going on. These are business things. We're talking about kids' activities. Nothing scandalous. Todd even called Frazier's wife. Jerry's wife convinces him that everything is fine. They have a happy marriage, and she has no concerns about her husband, Triano explains, and that calms him down. As investigators quickly discovered, Amy and Jerry Frazier were indeed having an affair. This gave them what they needed, a motive for Todd to kill her. The obvious choice is always the husband, says an expert. But Todd also had an airtight alibi, his son, Tristan. This meant that while his father stood trial for his mother's murder, Tristan would be the key witness for both the prosecution and defense. Everyone was on the edge of their seats to hear what the son would say now, recalls an observer. Tristan, then 14 years old, testified in court. Out of consideration for his age, his face wasn't shown. He gave his testimony via closed-circuit television. "Do you remember November 10th, 2018? He was asked. "Yes," he replied. Everyone knew what was at stake. From the first moments of the investigation, Tristan had provided an alibi for his father. Legal expert Matthew Troiano explains, Tristan told the police, "I'm with my dad, right? I haven't lost sight of him. I'm with my dad the whole time." He may not know it, but he's giving his father an alibi. If they're together the whole time, then he can't attack and kill his wife. Facing the jury monitor, Tristan spoke about the close bond he shared with his father. "We went hunting, fishing," he said. Obviously, the two often worked together on the farm. On the day of Amy's death, the two younger children stayed in the house while Amy joined Todd and Tristan in one of their large hog barns. Tristan described the division of labor. He was setting up portable heaters, anticipating a delivery of piglets to the farm. Todd was setting up equipment that supplied water to the barns. Amy was cleaning the lights. She would stand on a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and then she would reach up to the light bulbs on the ceiling. She would clean those, Tristan explained. Everything seemed fine until Tristan noticed something wrong with his mother. She said she was feeling dizzy. She kind of had to hold on to not fall off the bucket, and when she came down, her legs were kind of wobbly, he recalled. Tristan was concerned. 4 days earlier, Amy had undergone an outpatient medical procedure. This was her first time outside the house. "I think I said no cleaning," Tristan said. And then Dad asked the same thing. She just said, "No, I'm fine." But shortly after, Amy had another dizzy spell. According to Tristan, Todd became concerned. Tristan testified that Todd wanted Amy to go to the house and rest, but she asked to get an animal carrier from the red shed on her way, which was about 30 yards from the barn entrance. Todd said he would need it later to gather a litter of kittens and protect them from heavy machinery he planned to use. She said, "If you could bring it to the workshop, that would help. But if you just can't get to it, just leave it. We'll get it later," Tristan recalled. Amy left. Tristan said he and his father continued working together in the barn for about another hour and a half before going to an office at the entrance. There, Todd noticed the animal carrier wasn't where he had asked Amy to put it. "So, he asked you to go to the red shed to check on your mother?" Tristan was asked. "He asked me to check on her," Tristan answered, "because we thought maybe she was still having trouble getting the carrier. Or maybe she had just gone to the house. He just said, 'Go check on Mom.'" "But he told you to go to the red shed," the questioner pressed. "Yes," Tristan confirmed. When Tristan reached the red shed, he made the horrible discovery. She was kind of, he began. Did you see something protruding from or stuck in your mother's body? He was asked. Yes, Tristan answered. What did you see? A corn rake, he said. What did you do then? Tristan screamed for his father. Todd came, saw Amy, and told Tristan to get the family truck. And what did your father do then? Tristan was asked. He helped Mom out of the shed, he answered. Because the opening in the shed was so narrow, Todd would later tell police that he had to remove the corn rake from Amy's back to get her out. Todd then lifted her up and carried her to the truck. Tristan got into the passenger seat. Todd practically laid Amy across Tristan and drove off. Can you imagine the trauma Tristan must have felt, his mother on top of him as they drove away, with these severe injuries, massive bleeding? An expert asks. Yes, it's terrible. It's terrible. Tristan described to the jury that Todd called emergency services on the way to the hospital. The dispatcher told Todd to stop, so he pulled over to the side of the road. Deputy Luke Thompson was the first to arrive at the scene. I saw a young man who appeared to have blood on his coat, waving me down as I arrived, Thompson recalled. Thompson rushed to Amy. She was unresponsive, not breathing, had no pulse, he said. She had quite a bit of blood on her clothing. We put her on the ground, and I started chest compressions. While Deputy Thompson worked on Amy, he asked Todd what had happened. Todd said he wasn't sure, but that day Todd also said he suspected Amy had gotten dizzy and accidentally fallen on the corn rake while trying to get the animal carrier. As for Tristan, he told police his father was with him the whole time. He was with his father in the hog farm the whole time, explains an expert. So, if Todd didn't kill Amy, who did? There was certainly someone else who had access to the farm and who also had a relationship with the Mullises and a relationship with Amy. This man, with whom Amy was having an affair, Jerry Frazier, might have had his own reasons to get rid of Amy. Jerry Frazier had a motive to kill Amy, says an expert. He had a wife. He had children. He didn't want to leave his family. Amy often complained that Todd worked too much. He preferred staying home when she wanted to go out. Eventually, these opposites stopped attracting, explains an observer, and Amy sought attention elsewhere. The attention came from Jerry Frazier, the married father of two who managed the Mullis' hog operation. In this role, he got to know Amy, who was the farm's bookkeeper. Matthew Triano says it was normal for them to be in contact. And then it transforms into a personal, romantic, sexual relationship, he explains. The affair began in late May 2018. How often did you and Amy meet for this physical relationship? Frazier was asked. It depended, he answered. Everything was very brief. It might have been once a week, maybe more often, depending on how things worked out. They met secretly on the farm, on field roads, occasionally in motel rooms. I think it was more sexual for Jerry than for Amy, says an expert. It seemed Amy had very strong feelings for Jerry. Patricia Christopherson said Amy had envisioned a future with him. He made her happy, Christopherson said. She had talked about wanting to marry him someday. But after Todd discovered those phone records and started asking questions, Frazier got nervous. Yes, I told her we needed to back off, he recalled. Were you afraid Todd would find out about your affair? He was asked. Yes, he answered. Why? Well, why wouldn't you be? But they continued seeing each other. By late summer 2018, the rumor about Amy's latest infidelity was circulating. Her friend Terry Stainer says Amy was worried. She said, I'm going to tell Todd there are rumors to stop this. If he hears it, he'll think it's just the rumor mill turning, Stainer recalls. Dina Neshwat says Jerry Frazier was also feeling pressure. He had a wife, he had kids, He didn't want to leave his family, she explains. She's a threat to Jerry and his family. When Amy was murdered just 2 months later, Jerry Frazier immediately became a person of interest. He had motive. He had means. He's on this farm all the time, says an expert. He had just as much motive as Todd. Special investigator John Turbot questioned Frazier. He sat next to me in my unmarked police vehicle, and we talked for an hour and a half, Turbot recalls. Frazier readily admitted to the affair, but insisted he couldn't have killed Amy. He was at home in Anamosa, 45 minutes away. And just like Todd Mullis, his son was his alibi. His college-age son had an excellent memory, and so they had gotten up and worked all Saturday morning and then watched college football, Turbot explains. Investigators checked Frazier's phone records at the time of Amy's murder. We could see Jerry Frazier's phone had activity at 10:45, 11:45, 12:45, all down in Anamosa, says Turbot. But Daniel Neshwat says, if someone wanted to commit murder today, don't take your phone with you. Leave it at home. He adds, the phone signal only means the phone was there. It doesn't mean where Jerry was. The investigators concluded that Jerry Frazier wasn't involved and turned their attention back to Todd Mullis. Despite his alibi, it was said Amy wanted a divorce. That's motivation, explains an expert. Because if she leaves and they get divorced, he loses the farm, loses at least half, pays her alimony, child support, probably splits his life in two. So he needs to keep things together. Investigators were particularly interested in what Amy had told her friends about what Todd might do to her. I asked her why she stayed, recalls a friend, and she said she was afraid of Todd, and if he found out about a divorce or an affair, he would kill her. One time she said if he ever found out, she would disappear, recalls another friend. She even told Terry Stainer where to look on the Mullis property. She said, Terry, if I ever go missing, have him check in our new woods, Stainer recalls. Stainer worried that Amy's affair would provoke Todd. I told her, you know, Amy, you're putting yourself in a really dangerous situation, she recalls, and I said then, he will kill you. And why did I say that? Because Todd is just the person you don't mess with. As investigators built their case, they began focusing on Todd's actions on the day of Amy's death. For example, sending Tristan to the red shed long after Amy had gone to get the animal carrier. Why would she still be in the red shed? Asks an expert. A direction would be broader than just the red shed. Absolutely. Go find Mom. Search the farm. Why would Todd, of all possibilities, choose the red shed? Asks another expert. The prosecution would want you to believe he wants Tristan to find Mom. He needs someone other than himself to find Amy. In an interview, John Turbot accused Todd of murdering his wife. Matthew Troiano says Todd's reaction was revealing. When you're put in an interrogation room and you had nothing to do with your wife's death, anybody's death, but you're wrongly accused, you're going to fight back, he explains. You're going to yell, you're going to scream, and none of that from Todd. No, not enough. But Dina Neshwat disagrees. How would you describe his reaction? She was asked. Bewildered, she answered. What, me? I'm responsible? If someone said you killed your spouse, would you have an emotional reaction to that? Everyone reacts differently to everything. Todd tried to deny it several times. Todd even said, Do you want me to confess to something I didn't do? But what about Todd Mullis's watertight alibi? It turned out there might have been some cracks. Interesting story, says an expert. Did you ever lose sight of your father? Tristan was asked. Yes, he answered. Todd Mullis was the prime suspect in his wife Amy's death, but he always had a solid alibi from his teenage son Tristan. Tristan had told authorities he was with his father all morning. How important was that for Todd? Asks an expert. Crucial. That was his salvation. But everything changed just days before the trial, when Tristan was questioned again and admitted he hadn't had his father in sight the whole time. Tristan said he lost sight of Todd a few times when he went to the office at the entrance of the barn to get some water. Legal expert Matthew Triano explains, "This looked very different from before, where Tristan said, 'I'm with him the whole time. I have my father in sight the whole time.' When you don't have that anymore, it changes the whole situation." In this interview, Tristan estimated he was gone less than a minute each time. But when questioned by prosecutor Maureen Hughes during the trial, he said, "Do you know exactly how long your father was out of your sight?" Tristan answered, "No." Hughes pressed further. "Would it be correct to say you don't know how much time you were separated from your father while working in the hog barn?" Tristan's revised testimony, the prosecution insisted, gave Todd the opportunity to kill Amy. Every statement he made was more unfavorable for his father, says an expert, because the first one was pretty airtight. "What do you think is going on with Tristan?" an expert was asked. "I think he's like any other 13 or 14-year-old who's probably trying to do the right thing. He maybe wants to help his mother and help his father. And it's come to a head, and he has to testify against his father. It's terrible." But there was still room for doubt. Tristan said he never saw blood on Todd, and that at no point, while they were working together in the hog barn, did his behavior change. Moreover, Dina Neshwat claims that regardless of how long it took Tristan to get those drinks in the office, there was no way Todd had enough time to get from the hog barn to the red shed. To expect him to stab his wife with a corn rake, not once, not twice, possibly 3 times, wait for her to die to make sure, and then come back without blood, without torn clothing, with the same composure as if nothing had happened. That's not possible. The investigators had no physical evidence linking Todd to the crime scene, but they had electronics from the Mullis farm, including a security camera system. There are 2 angles for these cameras looking over the property, one of which would have captured the area around the red shed. Not inside the red shed, but around the red shed, explains an expert. And when investigators looked for footage from the day of Amy's death, we couldn't find any videos. Oddly, one of the cameras had a recording from the next day. Well, that doesn't seem to add up, says an expert. Do you think he deleted the footage? I think the obvious explanation is that he deleted the footage. It got worse for Todd. Investigators found a series of disturbing internet searches on Todd's iPad, including "What happens to cheaters in history?" "The thrill of killing," and "Killing unfaithful women." If I'm investigating a murder, and the guy I think committed the murder of his wife has searched online for what happens to cheating wives, don't I have a slam-dunk case? Asks an expert. It doesn't look good. All eyes were on Todd, who testified in his own defense. "Were you surprised?" Todd testified, an expert was asked. "You know, his reactions and his actions and what he does and doesn't do become such an important part of the case that the best person to explain that is Todd Mullis." For about 3 hours, Todd calmly addressed the many questions surrounding him, including why he hadn't called emergency services immediately. "I just wanted to help her," he said. "I just wanted to. Let's get to the hospital. Is something wrong? I'm a doer, I guess. I just wanted to help. I was in reaction mode. I wanted to get her to the hospital." Todd also explained to the jury why there was no security camera footage from the day of Amy's death. He said he believed his cats had accidentally knocked the antennas off the windowsill when they were trying to find a warm place to sit. The colder it gets, the more cats go to the heat, he explained. And there's a heater right under the window. The sun comes up in the morning, they sit in the window. In fact, there had been no footage for almost 2 weeks before Amy's death. And the reason why one of the cameras suddenly started working the following day? It was the day after, Todd said. I think after talking to family members and such, they said, "Do you have anything on the camera?" So I went out. I saw everything was knocked down and hanging on the ground. I picked everything back up. I didn't know how long it had been off or anything. As for the internet searches about cheating spouses, when defense attorney Gerald Feuerhelm asked Todd if he had done that, Todd replied, "No, I did not." Do you know who looked that up? I have no idea who looked that up. Todd said other family members used the iPad, including Amy. Did you ever search for wedding dresses? He was asked. I never searched for wedding dresses, he answered. Did you ever do a Pinterest search? No. Do you know what Pinterest is? I have no idea what Pinterest is. Then came the question everyone wanted to know. Todd, did you assault your wife Amy that day in that shed and brutally beat her and hack her with that corn rake? He was asked. No, I did not, Todd answered. Do you know who did it? I have no idea. In closing arguments, the prosecutor left the jury with one final thought about Todd's motive. Why did he kill Amy? Because he didn't want to lose his farm. Because she cheated. You may not like that Amy had an affair, but that doesn't mean she deserved to die. As for the defense, the state has not proven a case against Todd Mullis beyond a reasonable doubt. The dots don't even come close to connecting here. There was zero physical evidence linking Todd to anything that happened. With the week-long trial concluded, the jury was dismissed to deliberate and decide Todd Mullis's fate. After about 7 hours of deliberation, a verdict was reached. We, the jury, find the defendant Todd Michael Mullis guilty of the crime of first-degree murder, announced the jury foreman. Amy Mullis's family breathed a sigh of relief, and Todd Mullis slightly shook his head before being led from the courtroom in chains. As this juror explained, the jury reached consensus by going through all the evidence again. We talked about all the possible scenarios there could have been, and it was like we couldn't find any plausible explanation, she said. But then we went back to Todd and all the points against him. It was a series of unfortunate events that just didn't make sense. Starting with Todd's decision to pull the corn rake from Amy's back and drive her away to get help before calling emergency services. I don't understand why he didn't do that, the juror said. And the fact that he chose not to, was that a big deal for you? And she says Todd didn't do himself any favors by taking the witness stand. To me, he came across as cold, she said. He was a cold fish. You know, he was probably a man of few words, which many farmers are, but when you talk about things they have passion for, like their families or their farms or their wives, they can usually show some emotion. Then there were those internet searches. We came to the conclusion that it was him, the juror said. It wasn't just a crime of passion, he had premeditated it. After being found guilty, Todd Mullis hired a new legal team and filed a motion for a new trial while awaiting his sentencing. Now it's going to become a legal question of whether he got a fair trial, explains an expert. Was anything done wrong that shouldn't have happened? Todd's motion claimed, among other things, that Todd's trial attorneys had flagrantly disregarded his instruction to argue that Amy died by accident. Right from the beginning, Amy Mullis was brutally and intentionally murdered, the attorney had said. When that happened, Todd wrote on a piece of paper, "What the hell was that?" The defense attorney's job is not to convince the jury that Todd is innocent, explains an expert. The job is to create reasonable doubt in the jury's mind. He should never have eliminated that possibility. He should have left it open for the jurors to wonder, was it an accident or was it murder? The judge ruled on the motion. As to the defendant's motion for a new trial and motion in arrest of judgment, I'm going to deny those motions in their entirety. We will proceed with sentencing. Before being sentenced, Todd Mullis took one last chance to address the court. "I didn't do this," he said. "This is supposed to be America, where you don't have to prove your innocence. I thought it was innocent until proven guilty. I feel like it's the other way around here. And I was a faithful and loving husband." "Mr. Mullis," said the judge, "for the charge of first-degree murder, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Now, as Todd Mullis appeals his conviction from prison, the impact of Amy's death continues to be felt by all who loved her. "This case is a tragedy in every way," says an expert. "You have 3 wonderful children who not only lost their mother, but simultaneously lost their father as well." What Todd Mullis did, if he did it, is that he acted selfishly in his own best interest to eliminate a potential problem in his life, says another expert. But he didn't think enough about his 3 children and all the other levels of trauma that would result from that. 4 victims, not 1. At least. And so ends this tragic story from Earlville, Iowa. A story about love, betrayal, and murder that shocked an entire community and changed a family forever. We can only hope that Amy Mullis's children will somehow find peace and healing as they cope with the loss of both parents. Personally, I think there actually isn't enough evidence to prove Todd's guilt. For me, the internet searches would be the only incriminating piece of evidence. But since the whole family had access to the computer, it could have been anyone else in the family. You're probably wondering who besides Todd would search for punishing a cheater. Is there perhaps a possibility that it was Tristan? Jerry Frazier said in his testimony that he and Amy had intimate encounters all over the farm, in the fields, and so on. Also, there were already rumors in town that the two were having an affair. Could Amy's 13-year-old son have seen or observed the two being unfaithful on the farm without his mother and Jerry knowing about it? Tristan had a close relationship with his father and helped him on the hog farm. He was accustomed to killing from an early age. He fished and hunted game on hunting trips, or at least was present when his parents did this. Maybe it was Tristan who killed his mother, out of loyalty to his father, because he had found out about his mother's infidelity. I think there's enough doubt in this case that it could be that Todd might be telling the truth and is innocent. What do you think? Is an innocent man in prison? Or did Todd murder his wife?